Ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the LaunchDay podcast. I'm your host, Dean Svetkoski, aka Dean. Today in studio, we have PK Gupta. Did I pronounce that right, PK?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
What's the actual pronunciation?
Well, I don't think there is one, to be honest. I grew up, some people said Gupta, some people said Gupta, so 50-50.
Yeah, I love it. Too good. I love the sort of casual attitude about this as well. That's awesome, man. So we've got PK Gupta in the studio. Look, I'm going to pretend like I know nothing about you, PK. Take it away. Let our listeners know what you do.
All right, so professionally, commercial or business-wise, what I do is I have Australia's only educational online course in real estate that's completely independent. Doesn't sell you a property, doesn't have any upsell, doesn't get you a house and land package, doesn't get you an off-the-plan apartment. It's education for education's sake using data. So that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love it, man. So basically you help, want to be property investors. You help them get into the property industry. Is that right? So creating wealth through property.
Yeah, exactly. So new or experienced people that might have heard other people make money in property. They might be in Sydney, they might be in Melbourne, and they're like, I don't know, I don't want to work till I'm 65, 70, a little cliche stuff. And property in Australia, at least, has a real potential to allow people to exit the rat race, not in 2 years, not in 5 years, maybe not even in 10 years, but in 10 to 20 years, it's possible, it's practical, it can happen for the average person. So that's really who my clients are, and they're people who want to learn. They don't want to be given a fish, they want to be taught how to fish along with someone who's done it before, and they want to use data. Everyone's an expert in property, right? In Australia, they don't just want another guru, aka me, or another million or 25 million. They actually want to learn data, the cold hard facts, and how to do it properly.
Yeah, I get it. No, I love that. So look, this podcast is about wealth creation. It's about starting a business. It's about, things of that nature. I mean, how would you say that with what you do, that could fit into the picture for those individuals that, want to create wealth? Because look, anyone wanting to start a business, right? I mean, there's many methods to creating wealth. And there's many people in different walks of life, different stages of where they are in their life. How would you say that someone who's listening would be able to, benefit from property? Instead of saying, oh yeah, I've got, $200,000, I want to start a business. How could they effectively, maybe perhaps invest in property? How beneficial would that be compared to, say, for example, investing in a business?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm going to try answer it from the perspective of I used to be an investment banker, and I also used to be a management consultant. So I have some experience trading stocks, which is also a wealth creation tool, and I have some experience in going into companies, small and large, and improving them, improving the management, improving the cost structure, changing the revenue models to then, make money in a business way, then sell it for a profit. And obviously what I do at the moment is real estate. So I feel that in my own humble way, I kind of have a good lens on different ways to make money. And in terms of property, it's not just investing in property. Property is actually a business. If you invest in a property, 2 properties, 3 properties, 4 properties, that is actually a business. It has a P&L statement. It has a balance sheet. You need startup capital. There's risks involved. You need a team around you, like conveyancer, mortgage broker, etc., to do a lot of the things that you can't do yourself. Just like a business, you're the CEO. That's like a glamorous title, but that there's people much more skilled than you that you hire to get the business going, to get the business improving. So in terms of property as an avenue to create wealth, honestly speaking, one of the downsides is that you need some cash to start with. Whereas an online business these days, right, like Shopify or so many instances or examples, you almost need no cash, maybe $1,000, I don't know, something like that, and you can get going. You can start and scale it to the moon. With real estate, you do need about $50,000. But the difference, and at least myself and my clients, the difference between thinking about starting a real estate business versus starting an online or e-commerce or a traditional bricks and mortar business is that real estate can be done on the side. So like most of my clients and even myself when I started, we start with a 9 to 5 job and we're like, oh gosh, we're not maybe that entrepreneurial, that risk appetite may not be there to be like, okay, let's shut this 9 to 5 off. Let's go all in on a business, and hopefully we're the next Mark Zuckerberg. Real estate is like where you do a little bit tinker on the side and you build passive income. You build and it goes higher and higher and higher, provided you know what you're doing. And there comes a point at which you can say, look, that passive income is actually more than my active income, my 9 to 5, and I can switch entirely. Or you might say my passive income isn't quite as much as my 9 to 5, but I've dipped my toes into the real estate waters. Now I want to do more active strategies. I want to flip, I want to do developments, and then the sky's the limit. And then I can leave my 9 to 5. So active versus passive, different real estate strategies. But the key thing is you can start it regardless of whether you're still in a 9 to 5 or you have a business. It's just something on the side. And it doesn't require too much, 50,000, but it just requires something, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, gotcha. And look, is this something that, look, are you going to make money from it straight away? Or, like say I had $200,000 to spend, and then, through the data and the online course that you provide, I'm like, yeah, sweet, I'm going to go buy property. And then I go and buy that property, I rent it out. Would I benefit from it straight away? Like, will I be able to start supplementing my income straight away from something like this? Or is this like a long-term game that we're playing here?
So the answer is both yes and no, but you see a lot of ads on YouTube, on Facebook, and especially in America, I'd say, like real estate, all this. But honestly, it's a long-term game. Yes, you can supplement your income. You can start making passive income straight away, but it's not going to be of the order of magnitude of 6 figures. It's maybe not even going to be $50,000. That takes, like I said before, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years to get to. So it's not the kind of thing where you'd say, all right, all my chips are now in real estate, and I've got a couple of young kids and I've got a wife to support. This is what I'm doing. Like, don't do that, guys. Like, yes, you can do it. Like I said before, you can start flipping strategy. You can start developing property, buy land, put 3 townhouses on, sell it. In 2 years, you might make $200,000-$300,000. But like, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of risk to get to that $300,000. So unlike business where you can create a product or service and start monetizing it straight away, start living off it, in real estate, that living off it comes, more like 5, 10, 15 years down the road, but then it's entirely passive. Unlike a business, or most businesses at least, where you're still active, right? Even if you're the CEO, you're still having to like pull the strings. You've still got that headache of managing the team. Real estate is entirely passive. So that's kind of some of the pros and cons.
Would you say that someone who's like starting a business now, do you think it would be a good idea for them to, build their own financial position, and then is property investing something that you could also do part-time? Look, all right, I'll rephrase the question. How much time does it actually take if you were an active property investor and you wanted to start? How much time per week do you need to allocate to A, learn from someone like you and your online course that you're running, and B, purchasing property and building your portfolio? I mean, how much time is invested into that on a weekly basis?
So if we like box up different real estate strategies into something that is more passive versus more active. Passive is where you just buy a property, let it do its thing, collect the rent, it goes up in value, then buy another one, then buy another one. Like that honestly takes, the process of buying will take maybe 3 to 4 hours a week over a couple of months, and then the process of managing that property on a yearly basis is like 3 or 4 hours a year, like honestly speaking.
Oh, wow. So
this is nothing, right?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Now the other box where you're actively, flipping, so you're buying properties, you're renovating them, then you're selling them for a profit, or you're buying land or an old home, you're renovating it, subdividing it, building a couple of townhouses, and then selling it, or, there's unlimited different nuances or variations. That's a part-time job, all right? That can be from 20 hours a week all the way up to 80 hours a week. So it goes from
Wow.
part-time to more than full-time. That is like where the big money's at, but then you also need big money to start, the risk appetite, the know-how. So yes, you can leave your 9 to 5 just like that, and do an active strategy, but yeah, you gotta dig your heels in, and you're in for the long haul.
I'm interested, right, with all of this, and especially with you. You know, you're an investment banker. You've come from, you know, that certain walk of life. How? I mean, what was the turning point for you? How did you start getting into property, and you know, how long was it before you're like, nah, fuck this. I want full freedom, and I want to just enjoy my time. Like, at what point was that transition? So take me through the journey, start to finish.
Yeah, you know, Dean, like I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Like when I was maybe 11 or 12, like my school, high school, high school was at 13, intermediate school in New Zealand, we had like these Apple computers, like the big Apple
Oh,
computers.
those big huts, right? Like they had that. They kind of look like the end of like a rocket engine or something. You
Yeah,
know, like
like
those.
blue,
Yeah,
and but it was like state
yeah,
of the
yeah.
art at the time, and like Google was like, I guess, taking off. Like we started Googling stuff, and like all of my friends were Googling about video games and stuff, and like I'm a second generation immigrant, so my parents did all the hard work going to New Zealand from India, so like very humble beginnings. I literally came to the country with nothing. So what I was Googling was like, what job pays the most, like salaries, entry grad level salaries. This was when I was 11 and 12, right? And so like I found out just through Google that the best job that you could get was an investment banker. Everyone talks about accountants, doctors, astronauts, blah blah blah, but Google told me at that time that you could make 6 figures straight out of university as an investment banker. So like, I was into math, I was relatively studious. So I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I literally worked my butt off every day, every week, every school term, every year, then all the way through uni to become an investment banker. And just to give you context, like, investment banks don't just take anyone, right? And they're very unique environments. It's like real
It's not like the Wolf of Wall Street. You know, they got random people they're calling up on the phone, that kind of a
no,
thing.
no,
No,
no.
right.
So like of the I think it was the person, my boss at the time, I went for an interview and I got a call, and I was walking across the Sydney Harbour Bridge just because I was there, and he's like, there was 1,700 applicants and we gave 3 roles, and one of them is to you for a grad role. This was at
Wow.
JP Morgan. So I was like over the moon, because this was like, 9 years, no, not 9 years, 7 years in the making, 7, 8 years in the making. So I was like, this is the best thing. And there's a reason I'm giving you all this context. So like, this was like the pinnacle, and I was making 6 figures out of uni, like 6 figures out of uni is like a big thing, right? So
Absolutely,
at
it's
least for me
massive.
anyway, it was more than my dad earned. So it was like, this is tremendous. My mum's making like less than half as a machinist sewing curtains. So for me, this was like a game changer for our family. So I did that. And then 6 months in, I was like, okay, I'm kind of having fun, but I'm making this 6 figure salary working 90 hours a week. And I see my boss, and he's miserable. And I see my boss's boss, who just had a baby girl, his second baby girl, and he voluntarily chose not to be at the hospital with his wife because he was at work. He was, he was on a
Wow.
million bucks, but he was working because that's what it took. So I was like, okay, my career projection at an investment bank is $1 million a year, but it's not like it's decoupled from effort. Like I'm gonna have to work 100 hours a week every week, to get that $1 million. And at that time, I will be honest, I was very materialistic. I was driven by money. I didn't really understand broader principles in life. And so 6 months in, I was like, you know what? Like everything that I've strived for during my intermediate, my high school, my university days, like this is a massive fake out. Like I didn't even see my girlfriend at the time because there was just no time. They would send a car on the weekend to your house and to my apartment and to come back into the office. It was ridiculous. So
Wow.
6 months in, I was like, there's got to be a different way. I knew stocks, right? I mean, everyone who thinks that you can get rich on stocks, yes, you can. And I knew more than anyone because I was on the inside at JP Morgan trading oil and gas stocks. But I was like, there's no way that I can retire through stock trading in the foreseeable future. There's just no way. Like you need $1 million to start playing with big money to be able to retire. If you start with $20,000, $30,000 in stocks, you make 50% return on investment in a year. That's
And
really
you're sort of looking
enough.
at like the sacrifice, right? So, comparing the sacrifice with the benefit and going, well, what am I sacrificing for
Yeah.
the reward?
And
And
even
I
the
get that.
reward wasn't even like that amazing, right? So then I turned to real estate, and I don't have any history of real estate in my family. My dad was dead against me going into this, and I was like, all right, well, I've heard people buy multiple properties and just live off the passive income. It seems that passive income, even if it's just 100, 200K a year, is more valuable than $1 million of active income. Because in the active income, like you said, you're sacrificing something, your time. You ask Bill Gates, and he'd give you $200 million or $200 billion if he could just have 5 of his years back. Right? Time is more important than money. So I went into real estate because I realized that you cannot achieve that in the stock market. Yes, you can live off dividends, but by the time you accrue that much dividend payout, you're going to be 50 years old anyway, right? So the real estate market was my avenue to like get out of corporate. I still worked, for another almost 10 years because like I said before, it takes 5, 10, 15 years to exit on a reasonable passive income. But then I did, and that was the beauty about it.
That's awesome, man. That is absolutely brilliant. And in all honesty, like I was just having this conversation with my girlfriend yesterday, and the entire conversation was around the fact that we were talking about putting in the effort, the work, the energy, the time, making those sacrifices. And she was like, "Oh yeah, but like, listen, but if you're doing all of that but neglecting the relationship, family, things like that, then like, I'm going to leave your ass." Like that's basically what she said, right? Right. And that was like part of what I said too. And I said, yeah, well, that the one thing that, seems to be my number one value is family. So I'll always I'll make sacrifices to the benefit of family. So obviously me being someone who is putting myself out there, constantly challenging myself, the fruits of my labor will trickle down to, to everyone around me. But at the same time, I also recognize when you need to be present and recognize when you need to be putting effort, time, and energy. And, when you get stuck in that position of just chasing your tail for money, it becomes a bit like a rat race, you know what I mean? And you kind of lose sight of where you're going, and you tend to start losing things that are important to you, especially family, because you get so absorbed in chasing and chasing and chasing that you forget about what's truly important. And as the saying always goes, right, what we have in life is always borrowed. And when we die, we give it back. So really what's important, is it the money, because that just disappears when we die? Or is it the memories that we're able to make? Now,
Exactly.
that being said, I also recognize that money is a gateway to freedom, to be more present, to spend more time. So whilst money in my eyes is like the root of all evil, to some degree, at the same time, I do recognize that it's a paramount factor into being able to spend your time and create experiences. It's not the most important thing, but it is required. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. And like honestly speaking, I didn't have this mindset when I was hustling, and maybe a lot of your audience as well. Like they're entrepreneurs, they're like hustling. Money is their north star, and that was it for me as well because I don't have any before. If you don't have something, it's like you believe that that's the panacea to all your problems. And then when I started having it, I sort of realized that actually it's not bringing any more happiness. Like it requires level of introspection to say, all right, before I was earning X, now I'm earning X plus Y and not working, but I'm actually not any happier. And when that kind of hit home for me, I was like, I wonder if other people feel like this. And I'm part of this like mentoring community, and there was a guy who has a business in that mentoring community, and he wrote a post one time on the Facebook group. He was like, guys, now I'm making $1 million a month. In my business, I spend 3 or 4 hours a week. This is not me. This is that guy. I'm quoting him. But I'm wondering if this is all there is to life, and I'm considering giving it all up and, like giving it all away and just going back and finding a normal job in an office just so I can find meaning again, just so I can find connection with people. So it's like this guy, he was based in the US, and I was reading that, I was like, I'm not quite at that position, but like if that is an avenue that could be where I find myself in, then I need to like pivot, I need to shift how I live life, because otherwise you lose meaning and you just get into this hedonistic lifestyle of, all right, I used to be happy with a Toyota, now I need an Audi. And then 5 minutes into owning an Audi, it's like it becomes the new norm. And now I need, the next thing up. And next thing you're not even happy with the Lamborghini. And I found that for myself, it's not the objects of the senses that I was enjoying. It was just the idea of enjoying them that I was enjoying. Do you know what I mean? It's the idea of enjoying something that I was enjoying, but that idea, it evaporates. It goes into nothingness as soon as you get something, because you're like, the actual matter didn't bring me any happiness at all. So the reason I'm saying all this is like, I completely agree, and I'm kind of at the stage of my life now where, like you said again, you've got the freedom. The money was important. You get the freedom, but now it's what you do with it. And you can money is the root of all evil. I believe that money is just energy, and what you do with it means, are you using it in an evil purpose or in a good purpose? And so, and it has to be satisfying. It's not that you just give it away to charity, although that's good, but does that bring you satisfaction, or is it actually using your arms and legs and helping people, like physically going to Africa or going to India? Is that giving you happiness? Everyone's different. You got to find what actually brings you happiness, but it's definitely not money.
I get you, man. Do you think that, like, material things like Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Bugattis and all these things, right? Wearing a Rolex watch, you know what I mean? Do you think these material things contribute to potentially the drive for success? Because it's interesting what you said, right? Because you're like, there's this, it was the idea of having them that you were happy with, right? So you're finding pleasure through thinking about the idea of having it, and then you get there and then it's kind of like this empty space. And I get that. Like, in my eyes, like based on what you said though, is that no matter the circumstances of where you are, even if you have made it to the point where you can buy Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Bugattis, right? You can still make that change in your mindset as to what's important, the material objects. But if you're enjoying yourself through the process, do you think that potentially indulging yourself in those materialistic items is a way of sort of continuing? Because you get to let's start with a Lotus, because that's like $120,000 car. You buy yourself a Lotus, and then you get the Lotus and you're driving it around, and like, oh, well, now I want a Lamborghini. It's another $120,000 on top of that. And so then, all right, now it's $240,000 for the Lamborghini. And then you sort of take steps towards those positions, and then you're therefore being more hungry to grow your wealth. Do you think it's a motivator, like despite the lack of importance that they actually truly have in life itself? Do you think it's also a way that for some people it may be a motivator to keep on achieving without neglecting the fact that they should be present and spending time with family?
Yeah, I think if you can do both, then there's nothing wrong. Like if you're putting a signpost and saying, I want to get to that signpost, and you get there and that helps you catapult to your next signpost and next signpost, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I mean, that is what makes the world go around, right? Money makes the world go around. Achievement makes the world go around. But when you get to that signpost, if you're not enjoying that signpost, but you're still living in the future, then no matter how many signposts you achieve, if you're always living in the future, achieving or trying to achieve something more, you'll never be in the present, and you'll never actually enjoy that signpost, that car that you actually got to. And I think that was sort of my predicament where, like we're getting nicer things. It just, even like a very simple, like forget Lamborghinis, I don't have a Lamborghini, but like even very like simple things like going to Woolies, right?
Yeah.
Like back when I was in university, where I'd go shopping, I'd be like, oh, let's try keep this under $15, $20, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Was kind of my mindset, and it was required. And, then fast forward now, I'm like, go to Woolies. It's like, I don't don't even look at the price tag, right? And I'm not saying this from a boastful perspective, but like it's those things that have allowed freedom in my life. It's not the car, it's not the singular material object, it's the lack of stress, the lack of anxiety, the lack of having to worry about everyday things, so that you can elevate your consciousness and think about things that are more extraordinary, if you know
That's what
what
I
I
was going
mean.
to say, right? You hit the nail on the head. I was going to say, walking into Woolworths or even a restaurant for that matter, and you're looking at the price, and it creates a level of stress and anxiety, because you know that when you walk in, you have a list of things to get, but you also have to keep it under budget. And then you're just like, oh man, do I need to start taking things out of it, or do I blow the budget? And then you have to think about all of those things, right? Thinking about all of those things just creates so much anxiety. And you want to kind of live a life where you're sort of anxious free, where you're stress free. You can just sort of go walk about the ground that you're walking on, and being able to worship it yourself, not other people, but you to be able to say, yes, wow, I'm so grateful, but I don't have to think too hard about what I'm doing. I had this experience when I was around this time in Thailand last year, and I was just kind of, walking around and looked at my now ex-partner, and I said, do you want a necklace? I know you've always wanted like a proper pure gold necklace, very Thai traditional, because she's Thai as well. And I'm like,
22 carat.
yeah, yeah. And look, I could get that's a little bit more luxury than a restaurant or groceries, but I was like, yeah, sure, no worries, and it was just the kind of mindset that I had, was like, I know this isn't going to break the bank, regardless of the circumstances. It was going into the restaurants and indulging myself, and like I love indulging in experiences, especially with food or travel and things like that as well. We took 3 private boat trips, so we paid for the entire boat rather than going on with all these other people. There was no time limits. We didn't have to run around on a schedule. So we could go to any island that we said. If we said we wanted to go to James Bond Island, that's where the captain went. And then if we wanted to spend an hour there, we could spend an hour there. If we wanted to spend 4 hours there, we could spend 4 hours there. So like it was the ability to obtain, and you know what, those experiences I'm going to take with me, because I have been on holidays on a budget, and then constantly thinking about how much I'm spending, and then going on the tours with everyone else, and then not really being able to immerse myself in the experience because there wasn't enough time. So to be able to have the wealth to freely do those things without the stress and anxiety of checking your balance, like that, I full and wholeheartedly support the idea of that. So I understand where you're coming from too. Mine just happens to include a few more material objects.
No,
You know what I mean?
think we're on the,
So-
we're totally on the same wavelength, and I feel some people are different as well, and we got to honor that. Like, I spoil my son. He's 4 years old, and I kind of buy him almost anything he wants, which is actually really bad parenting. So he's got like a whole room of like toys, and I noticed that he was like not spending that much time with like each and every toy. He was kind of just skimming and going around. And my mum was there. My mum was over, and she was like, when you were little, like we used to get you one toy, like in 6 months, because that was the budget. And she said, but you know what, like you used to savor that toy, even if it was just a modest, humble little thing. You used to play with it. You used to play with it until it got broken, then you'd have to glue it together, and you'd love that toy for like 6 months. And so like, in terms of what you're saying, like we're these types of people who we love experiences, indulge, not have to think. But what do you think? I also think there's a beauty in not scarcity, but there's a beauty in savoring just a single item, even if it's something that everyone already has. But if you can be present as a boy, as an adolescent, as an adult in your relationships, if you can savor that, if you can enjoy that, then there's something very special about it, right? It's like these days we don't have like a favorite thing. We have like a million things we couldn't live without. But I remember like 20 years ago, it was just like, if I just have this one thing, for me, it was like this little bouncy ball that I loved. If I just have that bouncy ball, I can live life happily,
Yeah, yeah. No, I get you, man. And look, I was really thinking about this before, right? Especially with my daughters. I've got 2, and they're 4 and 7. So, with their ages as well, I started realizing, oh yeah, the iPad broke. I went and bought another iPad. And then I think from that moment when I just handed her this brand new iPad, I'm like, all right, sure, it was $500, it wasn't like one of those fancy iPad Pros or anything like that. It was just a standard $500 iPad. But I kind of sat there and went, she just got that so easy. When I was a kid, man, I had to wait till Christmas to even get a bloody PlayStation game. Not the PlayStation, just the game, right? So I would ask for a game that was released in July, and I'd be waiting till Christmas until I got it when I was her age. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I actually started to adopt a new attitude where it's hard to, especially with society nowadays and all of their friends having all of these material things, but I started to reward as the action, as an outcome of an action. So I decided to, I suppose, in what traditional ways would put it is gamify it or create it more in a sense of achieve this goal and get this item. If something broke, I wouldn't immediately replace it. I would first say, well, look, this is broken now, but hey, look, how about we keep your room clean a little bit more often? How about we, focus on doing homework and things like that? Not that at her age she has homework yet, but getting her to do those sort of activities, those extracurricular activities to encourage her learning. And it was more complete these tasks, achieve these goals, then be rewarded, because I didn't want to just hand it to her so easily. And that for me, it's been a really big change, because now, like for example, like my daughter loves playing things like Roblox, right? Roblox, whatever you call it, right? It's really popular for these young kids. And she asks me to buy Robux so she can decorate her character and things like that. Now, for me, I'm like, I don't really want to be paying money into a game that's, like I remember games used to be buy it once and it was yours forever. Yeah. Now it's keep paying to play, right? And so I don't like the idea of it, but it is something for her that she wants. And so, it's kind of like the same thing for saving for a house. It's the same thing, it's that incremental indulgence or reward that you work towards. And it's the same thing for her. Now she knows straight away, before she even comes to me and asks to have Robux purchased on her iPad to play Roblox, right? Now she will go and do certain things first. So she comes up to me and asks for it, and I go, okay, well, did you clean your room? Yes. Oh, did you do the dish? Did you put all the dishes away? Yes. Did you do this? Yes. Did you do that? What? You never asked me to do that before? Yeah, well, I'm asking you now because you said yes to everything else. Go do that, and then we'll think about it, right? So, that's kind of been my strategy, and it has been working well because I'm trying to. And look, I'm not the world's best with finances. It's not my specialty. Obviously, in contrast to yourself, but I am kind of looking at ways to incorporate a different strategy. So that way, those older traditional values that you and I grew up with aren't lost in between the lines. Because I definitely, exactly like you, I spoil them to bits. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious to hear from you, because you're an entrepreneur, Dean. You have a business, like you said at the start. You're out there on social media. Do you try to instill values like entrepreneurship or taking risks, or a business mindset versus the employee mindset? Do you try to teach them? And if so, like how do you do that? I know we're on an interview, but I'm just genuinely interested as a fellow dad.
I thought I was the guy asking the questions. No, I totally get that. I mean, and that's, I find it interesting that you ask. Are you asking because you'd like to maybe do that for your son as well?
Yeah, totally. Because that's my fear, right? Like, because maybe yourself, but definitely me, I hustled to get to where I am. But these guys they're never going to have to hustle. So yeah. What are they missing out on because they've never had to never will have to work hard?
Third generational wealth, right? That's what it's called. You got your first generational wealth. That's your parents. They migrated. They had nothing and built a home. Second generational wealth, where you're becoming the wealth creator. And then, your third, which is the recipient of all benefits to the point where you start. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube and TikTok right now that, are sort of saying like, hey, these third generational wealth kids, they wouldn't know what hard work is. And then by the fourth generation, they're starting all over again because the ones in the third generation spend it all, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I get the question. And, especially with me, I do encourage entrepreneurship. I encourage entrepreneurship in a number of different ways, and they come from all different aspects. So for example, I'm very open with my daughter about money. And obviously I don't tell her the whole story and how much is in the bank, but she'll actually now, since we started doing that exercise, I start talking to her about the cost of things, and I start talking to her about the cost for me to do business. And she will ask me, oh, how much money did you make today? Every day after school, Daddy, how much money did you make today? And I'll tell her the number. And like, let's just say hypothetically, I'm like, oh, Daddy made $5,000. And then she'll go, oh, wow, does that mean we can buy a trampoline? A trampoline's only $1,000. And I go, no, but sweetheart, Daddy has to pay the software developer $2,000. Daddy has to pay this person. And then we're left with $1,500. And then she'll go, oh, yeah, but, then you can still buy the trampoline. And then I go, no, sweetheart, because the $1,500, 750 of that has to go to our rent. I'm renting at the moment because of the separation. Rent vesting is the plan, right? So, especially with the current market in Sydney, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
So, but I was teaching her those financial values where I lacked a lot, which has now taken a higher interest in mathematics for her as well. But it's also showing her that working smarter is better than working harder. So I'll always let her make her own mistakes. I'll always show her a faster way to do it. And then I'll also show her that sometimes you can just pay other people to do it when it gets too hard because we'd rather be at the beach.
Yeah.
But I actually explain those things to her very specifically. So she'll do it. And then I'll ask, how long did that take you? And then, oh yeah, like 2 hours. And then I'm like, yeah, it took you 2 hours to do that. And then, wouldn't you rather be doing something else? But the idea of hustle, yes, the grind is important, but I also still believe like working smarter and not harder is just as important. You kind of have to look at a lot of different sort of things. And I also go through, and it's the same thing, it all comes down to money at the end of the day too. We do things like, arts and crafts, and then I tell her, why don't you try and sell it? Why don't you sell it to your friends? That's what I did. That's what made me so entrepreneurial, man. When I was even in at her age, those Scoobies, he made those bracelets with those little strings. I used to make him in sporting team colors, right? Dead set. I used to have like a folder of DVDs and go, oh yeah, which movie do you want? I'll go home and I'll burn it and bring it back. I used to sell them for $5 a CD. I used to sell the bracelets for $2, right? And I sit there and I actually educate her and say, why don't you make something, go to your friends and sell it for $2? And then I'll ask her, say, how long did it take you to make it? Oh, this one took me 10 minutes. And I go, great. How much did you sell it for? $2. Wow. Delilah, that's amazing. That means that you were earning $16 an hour. And she goes, oh, wow. Oh yeah, you're right. And then like, she's like, so if I can make, 6 of these, does that mean I'm now going to make, sorry, it's $12, not $16 an hour. Told you I'm terrible at maths. But explaining to her, now it's $12 an hour. She's like, oh, can I make $12 every day at school? That's like 5 ice blocks. Obviously for kids, the reward is smaller. It's more playful. It's not going to be the entrepreneurial, oh yeah, I'm going to buy all these properties and build a business, right? So that's not what the goal is for them. But encouraging them to make, create, sell, and understand the process of everything that took place in between that, so important, man. And that's, she does. She follows me everywhere I go now, and she never used to be like this all the time. It's been the last maybe 2 years where I've spent a lot more time with her engaging in these things. Do you know what I mean?
That's beautiful. I love it how you break down the math, like you break down the mechanics of it as opposed to just keeping it at a high level, because I find that kids actually want to know those details, but they don't know how to ask for them. So as parents, if we share that this is this much per hour, or this is how many, units you need to sell to make, then it kind of has a light bulb moment for them. I know it did for me when I was at high school as well. In New Zealand, my dad used to work for Ericsson. It was just Ericsson at the time, not Sony Ericsson.
Yeah.
And he used to get all like the model cell phones. They didn't work. They were just model cell phones.
I remember those.
You know what I mean? And those the flip out ones. And I used to take them from his warehouse to school and sell them. They didn't work, but all the kids just they felt cool to have like a phone in their pocket.
Yeah. Oh, that was me, dude. I used to run around the school with a bloody, I used to actually go into the Vodafone stores and say, oh, can I have one? Like I really want, and they'd give you an old model out the back and hand it to you, man. It was great.
That. And then you'd play pranks on the teacher. You'd bring it out and you'd be like, get off your phone. Yeah. It's not a real phone. And I'll sell them for $2. And at the end, similar to your daughter, I'd go buy chocolate or walk home, get some French fries or $1 for French fries. That was like the whole thing. And it was like the biggest thing for me, and this is what made me get into business and gave me that thirst for entrepreneurship, is when you even just make $1, but you realize that to make that $1, you had to add value to someone's life. And because you added value to their life, that's why they're remunerating you in return. And so when you realize that you can add value and get paid for that, and time doesn't need to be the currency, that is like the aha moment for, I think, because obviously your podcast is all about LaunchDay, about building and starting businesses. I think that everyone should keep that at the center of their mind. If you add enough value to people at a micro level, at a global level, your wealth is going to be directly correlated to that.
And I love that too, because, and it's great that you brought that up, because that was probably one other thing that I neglected to mention is I always ask her, oh, when you did this, how did the person feel when you gave it to them? And then she's like, oh, they were really happy, they were excited. And then I'll say to her, I'll be like, and how did it make you feel? Were you happy that they were happy? And then she, oh yeah, this is awesome. And she should be motivated by the chase of that dopamine effect of that genuine happiness collectively between the people that are benefiting from what she's doing and how she's benefiting from them. So it's a collective happiness. And I think that's so important. And you can teach that to children as well. PK, we're coming to the end of our interview. If there's anything that you wanted to sort of leave our audience with, some advice, maybe even a question, what would that be?
Oh, geez, put me on the spot. I think I can only speak from my experience, but I think perhaps a lot of your audience and listeners, like I said before, people who are early on in their business or entrepreneurial life cycle, I would say hustle, but don't forget the finer things in life. And that's obviously what we've been talking about, because there's been many an entrepreneur who've hustled their way to death, that have hustled their way to riches, and have never actually got to that golden pot at the end of the rainbow. They've never actually achieved happiness. So always focus on happiness and let the wealth be one of the vehicles to get there, not the only vehicle.
I like that, and I'll add on to that. Money is an accelerator. If you're depressed and unhappy and you get $30 million in cash one day, you're just going to be even more depressed and unhappy. If you are happy and content with yourself and someone gives you $30 million one day, you're going to be even more happy and content with yourself. So amen to that, brother. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. If anyone wants to reach out to you, PK, where can they find you?
They could just find me on YouTube, Australian Property Mastery with PK, or my podcast, Australian Property Mastery with PK, or my Facebook group with almost 30,000 members now, Australian Property Mastery with PK.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming along. And for all those listening, if you'd like to reach out to PK via email as well, you can always email us at support@launchday.au. We'll forward that on to PK. I'm sure he's more than happy to go and reply back to you directly. If you have a question for me, you'd like to get on the show for an interview, that's the same email again, support@launchday.au. We'll see you guys next week for another episode of the LaunchDay podcast.